Hi, I hope I didn't scare you off using end grain butt joints in the last video. Here are some ideas for strengthening them and also for being more efficient with the wood you use. So we discovered last time that no matter how well we prepared the end grain for a butt joint, it still broke on the glue line fairly easily. Now, I did mention in that video, although maybe didn't emphasize it too much, that the end grain sucks up glue quite quickly. So if you were making that butt joint and you just put a little bit of glue on there and put the pieces together, before that glue actually took, a fair amount of it will be sucked into the pores of the end grain, and so it doesn't leave very much on the joint itself. So the joint is starved of glue, and there's one obvious reason why it's weaker. Now what you can do is apply glue to both surfaces, a fair amount, leave it a few minutes for it to soak in, but not long enough for it to start curing, then apply some more glue and put your joint together. That way some of the absorption's already happened, you've reapplied glue, and hopefully then your joint won't be starved. Even so, it's still going to be weaker than a long grain to long grain joint. So that's one way at least of making it a bit stronger by the method of which you glue them together. Another way is to use some reinforcement, and a simple way to do that would be to use a biscuit on the end grain, a domino, some dowels, or as I've done here, I've cut a groove in both pieces and I'm going to put a spline in there. And the spline needs to be or should have its grain so it crosses the joint. So the grain in this spline is running in this direction. So ideally I could put it in the middle of this joint like so. Just make sure that the grain isn't running very close to parallel with the joint, and it should strengthen it quite considerably. So I've cut these joints very quickly on the table saw, just centering them on each piece. And then I've got my piece of spline material and I've used the hand plane just to bring it down so it's a snug fit. Mark for the length, and the worst thing you can do here is make it so that the spline's too long, too wide, and then your joint won't go together and you'll end up with a gappy joint. So just make sure you cut your spline very fractionally shorter than the full width of the gap. Cut that off, put in as many pieces as you want, and as you can see here, one piece in there, cut another piece off, put it in that half of the joint, and that's ready then to glue together to the other piece. That effectively makes a loose bridle joint, loose tenon joint, and that's a lot of long grain to long grain surface area, and it'll be really strong. If you think about it, that butt joint is going to have twice as much surface area as the depth of that slot, and that's all long grain to long grain. Same in that side, and so actually you're ending up with twice as much surface area for the glue joint as you would do if you were gluing these together long grain to long grain for that dimension. So that'll be a really strong joint. Now if you want to make a panel up, you'll get your various boards together, glue them up, joint the edges and glue them up. That means you need boards that are the full length of the panel that you want. Of course you might have a lot of offcuts which are a little bit shorter, not quite the full length of the panel. There's absolutely no reason why you can't prepare and butt joint the ends of these to make them long enough. So I might have a long piece there with a short piece on the end, makes it long enough. When that's glued between these two pieces, although the butt joint doesn't give it an awful lot of strength here, the long grain to long grain right along the joint will mean that butt joint stays together for good. So we can build up all the pieces we need to make the full panel, and so half of the material there pretty much is made out of scraps that weren't long enough to use in the first place. Now the one thing I do advise if you're doing this is to stagger the joints across the board. That's really from an an appearance point of view, if they're all lining up, then your eye will be drawn to that line across your panel. Now before I go, let me just mention that there are other ways of joining wood where the end grain would be coming together and we want a flush joint all the way around. They are the halved splice, the stepped splice, and here's a Japanese one as well, which is a little bit more complicated to do and I can't remember its name at the moment. So as you can see, there are ways of getting around the end grain to end grain butt joint weaknesses. And thank you so much to everyone who commented on the last video. Hopefully you'll comment again here with your ideas, different ideas of coping with that situation. So until next time, cheerio.